Right, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the Cabinet meeting of the 5th of July. Could I have apologies for absence first?
Apologies have been received from Councillor Isles and also from Councillor Potter.
Thank you. And Councillor Filmer seems to be running late. Record of decisions. Are the record of the decisions of the last meeting I agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 3, any declarations of interest of any type? No. Okay then, which takes us on to item 4, the IPM Southern Site Development, which I will be taking through Cabinet. And first of all, I'd like to refer members to section 10 on page 21. There are two recommendations there. The Cabinet is requested to agree to recommend to full council the borrowing of £12 million to be added to the capital programme as set out in the under 10.1, and then 10.2 is to request delegated authority to the Director of Place and Deputy Chief Executive in consultation with myself and relevant portfolio holders to take this forward. I think my comments are as follows really. This is another milestone in terms of developing Innovation Park Medway. This has been a long-standing project of ours involving significant investment, involving a significant allocation of government funding, and Councillor Chambers might want to speak about that in a moment, and it forms part of our enterprise zone that we applied for some years ago, and we're fortunate enough to have enterprise zone status allocated. It's just been a shame that the hiatus caused by COVID has affected not just people's health and lives, but it's also affected major infrastructure projects like this one. Obviously, people's health comes first, but the IPM delays have been significant. But now we're actually making some real progress. This is the first substantive proposal for building on the southern site, and work is ongoing on preparing the northern site, and marketing is underway. So we're actually making good progress at last. Obviously, with the inflationary pressures at large at the moment, that adds additional pressure to developers, and not least our organisations like Medway Council in bringing forward sites. But I'm afraid that that's a nettle we've got to grasp, because we can't allow any further delay in our aspirations to bring these sites forward. And this one in particular is very important to Medway in terms of the message that it sends in terms of regeneration and in terms of growing Medway's economy. And the Innovation Park Medway has got the potential for anything up to 3,000 jobs, and we're aiming at high GVA jobs, and that is part of our planning, and it has been since the inception of this project. So we take the strong view that if the council won't invest in its projects and its assets, then who will? And I'm afraid we have to lead the way and act very much not just as the landowner, but as the facilitator for developments such as this. So we now have the potential for an anchor tenant, and that's why the proposal is coming forward at the moment to deliver a building and adequate car parking spaces, and those are set out in very high level form in Appendix 1 on page 23. So I'm actually personally very pleased that we've got to this stage. Of course, with borrowing comes responsibility, and it's up to us to get the best possible deal we can for the building, and when it comes forward. And I think that we're quite capable of doing that. So that's where we've got to. Very pleased with the progress thus far, and I move section 10 as set out and go to Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Leader. I just want to comment first of all about the money that was received from central government, which was time limited. And I want to just make the comment here that although that was time limited, there was, because of COVID, and it's a pity the government didn't adopt the same attitude to the extension of the enterprise zone that it did to, or that we were able to achieve through the South East Local Enterprise Partnership, where the funding came through from central government, on an extension on the completion time because of the impact of COVID. And I think they could have adopted the same attitude as far as extending the enterprise zone and the time limit for the benefits that to be received from the enterprise zone. But here we are. We are where we are, and it, to me, you've already expressed the sort of uncertainties that have been caused by COVID, but particularly as far as developers and construction and the necessary equipment, everything that is necessary, including the necessary skills to build out on this site. But then we're not being affected any more than the general building and development industry itself. To delay on this, I think would only bring more uncertainty, and I think the end result could be that any extra costs that are likely to be incurred would only be greater if we did not proceed now, albeit with the caveat that that there is the uncertainties as far as what the total cost would be, but to delay, in my view, is not an option. We are ready to go. We've got an anchor tenant waiting for the heads of terms, so I think it can safely be said that it is a, if you like, a safe and positive anchor tenant, and all I can say is, despite uncertainties, we must go forward and agree the recommendations on page 21.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Chitty.
Thank you, Leader. I absolutely agree with the comments of Councillor Chambers, but I want to go back a little while on why this project is so important to Medway. And it is the commitment that we've had for a very long time to promote Medway as a really important business hub, if you like. It's not just about one particular type of industry. It is across the board. And we have manufacturing, we have obviously retail, which has taken a bit of a hammering, but we also have recognised from very early on the ability to provide the right type of facility to bring mixed employment into Medway, and the importance that we have always put on that. Now, it's never ever been easy. There are always challenges along the way, and certainly we've had to face some challenges with this. However, our determination, I think, is very clear in this paper and in the recommendation that is put forward. And I'm absolutely thrilled that we don't fall into a sort of second grade thinking in terms of industry, business, and all of those that show real interest in investing in Medway. Not just those that are here, but people from outside of the area. And it is a fantastic proposition, and I will be so happy to support the recommendations as laid out.
Councillor Goldwyn, please.
Thank you, Leader. I agree with all the comments that colleagues have made yourself, but I was just interested in paragraph 2.7. Just gives a little bit of information out the anchor tenant. We're talking about a business that's established over 100 years with offices in Kent and Medway, and in the last sentence it says their business is growing and are actively recruiting, therefore need a bigger space. And I think it's really good that we're in a position to back a local company and help them expand. And that's just what we should be doing, supporting our local business, growing our local economy. So I think this is really, really good news for Medway.
Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to say that I agree with what everybody else has said. I think this is a very important project for Medway. It's important that we bring it to fruition, and it's very good news that we've now got an interested anchor tenant, which was always the plan, to get people involved at an early stage and bring them in. I think we need to invest the money, and as we've got the climate change agenda item coming up later, I just hope that when we go into design and build of the car park, that we make adequate electric vehicle charging places available, because I think that would be a statement as well to help along with the climate change. Thank you.
Right, thank you, colleagues. Thanks for your comments, which I agree with in their entirety. I do actually particularly want to just comment on what Councillor Chambers said about the enterprise zone status, and I do absolutely agree with him that it would have been very easy for the government to extend enterprise zone status to take account of the hiatus caused by COVID, but it chose not to, and is pursuing other initiatives. So that's a shame, but which means that we can't now use that status as an incentive for incoming businesses. We will still, as an authority, gain enterprise zone status benefits in terms of business rate retention. So it's not all bad news, but nonetheless, that was a little bit disappointing. Actually, the whole site, if we view the whole airport site, this is really the second phase of ongoing projects. We've completed the full scope of the work at Rochester Airport, and that has provided some much better facilities there, albeit there's still work to be done when budgets allow. This is the second phase in terms of actually now we've got an opportunity to start buildings to come out of the ground, and as I referred to earlier, the third and largest phase is the northern site, and the groundworks for that are now well underway. So this is an example of us identifying an important area of activity in Medway, saying we'll do something and actually getting on and do it. So it'll be great to see this building start to come out of the ground soon. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Then go on to item on climate change action plan, and go to Councillor Doe, please, Councillor.
Taken place. First of all, of course, I pay a lot of tribute to my colleague, Councillor Galvin, on this. And the first phase of the 12 million refit energy efficiency programme has helped the council to get substantial energy and financial savings. So far, we've got 78 solar panels installed on various buildings, and they will save us a great deal of money, as well as, of course, helping to offset in the end some of the rising costs of that. The carbon emissions are now being properly measured, and what they have demonstrated is a 21% reduction in the council's carbon dioxide emissions as a result of the actions that we've taken through the plan. We've also installed nearly 4,000 LED smart street lighting replacements, and that reduces energy consumption and saves the council £689,000 in energy costs in this financial year. There are 34 electric vehicle charging points already installed in the council's car parks, and there are more to come of that, apart from what is provided by the private sector. 750 residents have expressed an interest in the Council KCC promoted scheme Solar Together Energy, which means that a significant number of homes will be fitted with solar panels to save and collect energy. We did have a climate conversation, as termed, with the public, held at the Corn Exchange. It was very well attended, and we have now a community network as a result of that, which we are going to encourage active involvement in climate change activities, and that there already schemes are being now worked up. On the green side of things, the over 500 trees planted, and also it changed the way in which we treat our green space areas. There was a lot of noise earlier in the year about the fact that the council wasn't doing no mow May, but what we prefer to do is to arrive at a policy which I think is going to be much more successful, which is to manage our areas in a sensitive way, so that we encourage much more natural greenery and more safe havens for animals, because basically a lot of those old, a lot of the animals that we used to see regularly are in fact now not so regular because there's nowhere for them to go. They've been chased from one place to another with development and so on. So, and lastly, of course, I should record that when we put into the survey of the Climate Emergency UK, they went round all the local authorities in the UK, and they rated us number 31, which means we're in the top 10%. However, as you will say, as I always say to certain people around this table, well, we can do better than that, and we've got to actually get even more. But I think it's a really good start, in all seriousness. Now, on table 1 on page 31, you'll see there a list of the number of schemes which have been bid for. It represents an enormous amount of money that's been put into schemes that have a green outcome. Now, I don't claim the credit for that because I think all the colleagues around this table have been involved in getting some of this money, and I'm very grateful that that is being done. It really shows what a difference really it does make across the council to get this money in, and I think that's absolutely excellent. You'll also see that we have produced an amended plan, or an updated action plan, which I've no doubt you've read thoroughly, but that actually does detail all the actions under 11 different headings, which are taking place all over the council. What we've done is to take out some of the things which are now business as usual. In the end, we should be able to take it all out as business as usual, but at the moment, you know, we are looking at that, and then we're looking at other areas that people have raised, people in the public, and also resulting from the actions that we've taken. And we're looking forward, I think, to a period really in the next years, which is set with the action plan, where we go much more engaging with local business, with local groups of interested people, and also, of course, where we in the council consider, we actually are trying to set an example which we hope others will follow. And one of the most important engagements is with schools, because my vision is that all schools should be signed up to green policy, because it's important that there's a clear message sent. You know, it's there that this is the world that they are going to live in, determined by what we do now and continue to do. So I think that it's very, very important that they're engaged, that they understand it. And indeed, there are a number of schemes and things they can do. For example, planting trees, that sort of thing, discouraging idling cars outside, and so on. And we're working with them to try and do that, and we're having quite a degree of success. Not enough, of course, but we will keep going. You'll see in section 4.5 we detail a number of new actions. I won't go through those all, but what I therefore move is what appears on page 37 under paragraph 14, where I ask you to agree to adopt the refreshed Climate Change Action Plan, with the full one of which is set out in Appendix 4, and to note the annual carbon emissions report, which, as I say, we're now measuring very well, I think, and we're really getting a handle on that, and that's set out in Appendix 6. So that's why I ask you, please, to do that.
Thank you, Leader. And thank you, Councillor Doe, for your introduction. I also support this climate change action plan. I'm a member of the advisory group along with Councillor Doe, and I'd like to thank the team. As you can see from the action plan, there's lots. It's a very long action plan, and there's lots of actions on it that have been identified. And the team go away and work really, really hard on trying to keep implement these actions where they can and work on them. As Councillor Doe mentioned, we've installed 34 electric vehicle charging points in council car parks, and there's a further 20 going to be installed here at Wharf later this summer, so that we can move some of our small vehicles to electric and start showing the public that the council is really into climate change and really pushing this agenda. It's good to see in the report, as Councillor Doe mentioned, that we've engaged with local community groups, which have identified to engage with local community groups, which have also very lot of local support for this climate emergency. So it's a very good report, and I'd just like to thank all the officers that work so hard in the background that bring us the report to our quarterly meetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chitty.
Thank you, Leader. I think that all of these issues permeate throughout the whole of the council, and certainly where planning is concerned, there are always added requirements put in place by government to make sure that climate change does come into play. Not necessarily firm identification, but it's an identification that certain issues should be taken into account during the planning process. And I think that we've proved that we're able to respond to those government requirements in relation to some of the planning issues. Obviously, a lot of residents feel that they need to have more say in relation to climate change. But I think as an authority, we are going further than most other authority in facing those challenging issues. And so therefore, I'm more than happy to support the recommendation as laid down. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brake, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Doe, for a very informative report that has been presented here today. It makes very interesting reading and really to me anyway, it highlights the fact that Medway Council is not only promoting climate change, but Medway Council is leading from the front and actually actively encouraging the community to be part of what is going on, as well as taking all the necessary actions that are possible by and through the local authority. Great deal of work has already gone on, and I think that today, as we look at the Climate Change Action Plan refresh, that shows really that we're not letting the grass grow under our feet, if I can use that phrase, but indeed what we're doing, in fact, is we're making sure that things are being refreshed, that things are moving forward. And I congratulate, and I join Councillor Gatkwal actually in congratulating and thanking all of those involved in the wonderful work that's gone on. When I say it involves the community, there's very good examples throughout where the whole community of Medway is involved, whether it be the elderly or indeed the young people. And we do know that the young people in themselves are very keen to see climate change very high, if not top of the agenda, not only in Medway, not only across the UK, but really across the whole of the world. But I suppose there was really one particular item that really caught my attention and put a smile on my face and really shows what young people are about, and that is on page 77, where action point 6.22, provide virtual road safety lessons to KS1 and KS2 children. Owner, Head of Transport and Parking, stakeholder, young people. Timescale,
do it now. And I thought that really is what our young people are all about. They can't be bothered with the short term and the medium term and the long term. To them, climate change is something that requires immediate action. And when I saw that, young people, timescale, do it now, I thought that's what young people are about. And that really is what Medway Council is about, making sure it's done sooner rather than later. So yes, I will be supporting the item. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Golding.
Thank you, Leader. And to follow Councillor Brake, I think what is impressive reading this report is how much has been done by now and is happening. As Councillor Doe said, it's only 12 months since the first plan was formed. And I think the progress made so far has been really, really wonderful to watch. I mean, Councillor Doe mentioned the 12 million refit programme. At the moment, we're actually only working on the first quarter of that. The first 3-point-something million pounds. But already you can see the fruits of that in this very room with our brand new LED, much more efficient lighting. And with this building, we've now got much higher efficiency boilers. We've got combined heat and power at Medway Park, which is one of our biggest energy users, but, you know, heating the swimming pool and those huge, great, wonderful sports halls we've got. It's great to have, you know, keep that nice and warm and comfortable for our residents to use. We're also looking forward to the future as well. Splashes Mark II is going to be built to a very, very high environmental specification. The primary source of heating is through air source heat pumps, but that will be topped up by super efficient gas boilers. Our new depot up at the Rochester Maidstone Road, the building there is built to very high environmental standards, complete with a green roof, and the whole scheme is going to be surrounded by really extensive planting, which will make the site very, very green. It'll probably absorb most of the carbon from the site, and hopefully with as the trees and planting grows, might even take some away from the M2 motorway, which runs alongside it. Another project we've been working on is investigating the viability of having a heat network, district heat network system for Chatham and Gillingham, and taking the heat energy out of the River Medway to do that. And we've been working on that now for some time with government agencies, and hopefully in a few months' time we'll be in a position to have a really detailed business case to put forward and see whether we can go ahead with that project or not. But certainly there is a lot of interest in the area, and it's now we're getting interest from the private sector as well to come on board that as well. My only gripe out of all this, and I see Mr Harris in the room, and I hope you forgive me this, because it's not personal at all, because I've got a huge amount of respect for Dave and his team, but, you know, but I wish the planners had taken on board the environmental issue of when they recommended the refusal for extra solar panels on this building. And I think that doesn't set a very good example that we're not prepared to do that. And if you look at the thing holistically, one of the major effects of climate change is more extreme weather conditions. And I think we've seen that over the last few years. And in fact, you know, if reading the paper yesterday, we've got floods in India and we've got extreme drought in Italy. You know, there's no doubt that climate change is affecting us. And one of the things that is more extreme weather conditions. And surely a few solar panels on the roof of buildings, historic buildings, listed buildings, is going to do far less harm to the fabric of those buildings than the extreme weather conditions will do to those buildings if we don't do something about it. So I think there's a very important issue here, and I hope we can all come to a sensible conclusion as to what needs to take priority, let alone the geopolitical situation we find ourselves in of late, where it's not just energy efficiency, but it's security of supply that's at stake. So there's much bigger issues here, but I really do welcome this plan. I think it's very good so far, but certainly from a council point of view, we're still only a quarter of the way through. And before I finish, I must give credit and praise to the council's capital projects team that have done a huge amount of work on all these things, and they beaver away in the background. They don't get seen by many people, but they're there and they do. But you can see the result of their work in this very room. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Doe.
Well, I'd like to thank colleagues for their input and also for their support. And I do recognise how much of a contribution we've had, both from all the officers across the council and, of course, from my colleagues. And I think that together we will get this job done. So I therefore ask you to accept those recommendations in section 14 and realise that we're on an ongoing course.
Very good. Thank you. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Go to agenda item 6. Councillor Chitty, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'll just briefly outline what the housing delivery test and action plan is about, because often there can be confusion. The government set down very clearly the housing numbers that they wish us to supply over a period of time. Now, that's very difficult, inasmuch as I've said many times before, the council, in the main, is not the major deliverer of housing. And the ones that are the major deliverers are the industry itself and various different, very large-scale developers. Now, they choose where they want to develop. That is entirely a commercial decision made by them. So how have we tried to, in some ways, mitigate that challenge? I have to say that we've been very proactive in encouraging developers to come to us, to the planning authority, early on to lay out their aspirations and the type of development they want to bring forward. And we have a number of actions to try and make this easier in the terms of accessibility and understanding. And that really is very important, because very often people misunderstand the process within planning. So we've wiped away many of the obstacles. Indeed, we have major developer forums, so they can come forward, discuss their hopes and their aspirations. And we mustn't forget that these major developers do hold quite extensive areas of land. However hard we try, we cannot force them to build out those sites, or to build out those sites in the type of numbers that would fulfill the housing delivery test figure. Now, as I say quite clearly, this is government telling us this is what we need to do. Having said that, it hasn't actually helped us in many respects on how we can bring some of these sites forward. That's a whole new and different discussion, and I'd always be happy to deal with that in some future time. You will see that the actual figures are improving, and one of the reasons they're improving is because Medway has become a hotspot for people wanting to come and live here. There is a market, and one thing you have to say and respond to is that major developers always recognise where there's a market and where they can actually promote their developments in that particular way. So, you know, bless the government's cotton socks. They expect us to do all sorts of things that in terms they are in control of. However, like all planning issues, there's a very, very clear guidance as to what you can and you can't do. And there's no way Medway would ever shortcut or try and overcome those tests. So what I'm seeking is for Cabinet to approve the publication of the Medway Housing Delivery Test Action Plan. Now, the action plan will answer some of the challenges, clearly not all, because it's a very complex subject, but in terms of actually going out for publication, that means that residents within Medway and across Medway have the opportunity to read what is really, really important to them. I'm sure there's maybe some questions, but I'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hackwell, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Chitty, for your introduction to the report. I think it's interesting to note in the report, although it's disappointing that we didn't meet the housing test of 95%, which is a very high bar. It's interesting to note that the last 2 years we've built the largest number of dwellings in Medway that we've got, and the early indications are that 21, 22 are also going to be on that upward trend. So it's very, very encouraging that we are building the highest number of houses we've built in Medway. And so it's not for lack of trying. Also, it's interesting to note in the graph of on page 133 that we seem to have a rolling bank of about 5,000 houses that we've approved planning permission for that seem to stay there every year and don't get built. So it's not as though the planning department and indeed the planning committee are actually stifling house building in Medway. It's just that we're reliant on the developers to build, and they're just not building it. They're holding a constant bank of around 5,000 dwellings. So if those were built, we'd easily meet the delivery test. Thank you.
If I could just add a couple of things, absolutely agree with that last point, and agree with the point that the council, except at the margins through our Medway Development Company, does not build houses. We act as a facilitator and an enabler, and we act as a catalyst to enable development to come forward. Now, very recently, the government, the latest census has been published, and that's been seized upon by some members as evidence that we don't need to build the number of houses that we've been asked to build, and that's true, but that matters not to government because it has based its housing targets on a national target of 300,000 a year. It's created a standard methodology that will deliver that number, and all the census in the world will not change that. So as evidence of that, this latest census points to Medway not needing the number of houses it has in its current target, as did the 2018 work. But the government, in order to fulfil its requirements, is falling back on the 2014 figures as evidence that those are the numbers you need. So I'm sure there'll be some hoo-haing in the press about the census says X, but I'm afraid the government says Y, and it's the government that calls the shots, I'm afraid. So we'll continue to do our best within those constraints. I think the other anachronism at play is that the government seems to think it's a good idea that if you don't meet your housing numbers, it increases them. Well, all I can say is to the government, you can increase them to whatever you like. The market is the market. And as someone famously said many years ago, you can't buck the market, and the market will determine how many houses are built, irrespective of government targets. Back to you, Councillor Chitty.
Thank you. And I absolutely acknowledge the comments that have been made. Certainly, this figure, and it used to be 7,000 planning applications that were still live. I think there is a real discussion to be had about this, whether in the future that any planning application that hasn't been built out in a reasonable period of time should then be null and void. I don't know the legalities of that, but I certainly think it's something that should be looked into. Now, one of the great problems local government has is that one of the great problems that local government has is that they're on the receiving end of government dictates. Now, this happened and had quite an interesting effect under the previous government. Certainly, it's having an effect under this government. We all know our areas and we know what the requirements are. One of the problems is, I think, that government look at a map and say, there's room for expansion. You know, let's do that. Let's make sure that there's plenty of housing provided for those people that want to move from their existing areas. That is not fair for two reasons. One, there should always be a priority for local people, and we should absolutely recognise that need and try and fulfil those requirements. The other requirement is for people to move from wherever it might be into Medway. And, that's a good idea. It relieves the pressures here, relieves the housing numbers there, and we can do quite well out of that. And it doesn't take into account the huge impact that this has. So, yes, we have a housing delivery plan. The reason it's fell short over recent years is because developers decided that they didn't want to develop out their sites. Nothing that we did hampered that. That was their commercial decision. And so therefore, we have these numbers. I think these numbers should always be indicative. I don't think our feet should be held to the fire, but that's not the way government works. But I absolutely and totally agree that we have to think first and foremost, as the leader said, about our requirements rather than being held to ransom by government. The requirement has been lessened theoretically. That is not going to happen. I know people will say that these figures will change everything. They will change absolutely nothing. So I'm more long-winded than I generally am, but I hope that the recommendation 10.1 will be agreed by the Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 7. Councillor Goldwyn, please.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, it's good to be able to report that the Debenhams site is now in the council's ownership. We didn't need to use the compulsory purchase order that colleagues approved earlier, but it proves the point that often that's a good tool to have in the box, because as with Mountbatten House, I think that concentrated people's minds when it came to negotiation. Now we've got a really golden opportunity to do something with the site. Whilst it's very, very sad that Debenhams has gone and the jobs that were there have also gone, but it does give us a golden opportunity, as it says in section 2.4 of the report, to unlock a key strategic site in Chatham High Street. And I think we've got to look at what we can do with that now. It gives us a good opportunity to have a more diverse commercial operations within the high street. It also gives us further opportunity to get more people living back into our town centres again, which will increase footfall across the town centre, and indeed make some small contribution to relieving the pressure on greenfield sites outside of the town centre. And all of us in this room know how controversial that is with our residents, but by bringing sites such as Debenhams, and we're leading on that now with MDC, with Garrison Point and with Chatham Waterfront. Garrison Point is selling well. We are, I think, approaching 60% sold already, and we won't be looking to get people actually living in there till later this year. But hopefully by Christmas we will have more people there. So there's lots of positive things happening for Chatham, and I think the Debenhams site is very much key to that. Although we've enabled some grant funding to come in, but as Councillor Chambers mentioned earlier, a lot of that is time-based, so we can't hang around. We've got to get that element done quickly. But you're seeing the recommendation at 9.1. There's a considerable another amount of capital required, just under 18 million, in order to get this project up and running. So I would strongly recommend to colleagues that we do this. It's just another example of how we're not just talking about the regeneration of Chatham, we're actively promoting and redeveloping Chatham to make it that vibrant city centre that we all know that we need it to be. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Chitty.
Very briefly, to pick up on the last point, this is about investing in the future. It is about absolutely acknowledging that everything we say and have said in relation to regeneration, we actually put our money where our mouth is. And I think that is really important, that we are seen to do that. No way do we sit back on our laurels.
I think on that point, I think there's nothing, few worse sights in a city centre than to see buildings boarded up and hoardings around buildings. So obviously this changes the dynamic in that part of the city centre, and it's very much to be welcomed, I think, and quite an exciting opportunity too, because on the basis that build it and they will come, this has been the premise on which we've set about the regeneration of Chatham as a city centre, and I think that is starting to bear fruit, and we can see that by the extensive building that's going on. And whilst it was disappointing to see a large departmental store leave Chatham, obviously that was a disappointment. We also looked at it as an opportunity, and that opportunity is what we're taking forward. So I think that's to be welcomed. Back to you, Councillor Colvin, please.
Sorry, I'll start again. I forgot my mic. Thank you, Councillor Hagwell. Leader, I'd like to move the recommendations at 9.1 on page 194 of the agenda.
Excellent. Thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We go to the final item, which is, again, you, Councillor Colvin.
Thank you, Leader. I was not expecting to have to present this, but I will do my best in the absence of my colleague, who's unfortunately not been able to be with us. I think Medway have done a really good, cost-effective job on behalf of this council. I sit on the liaison board, which acts as the client side to hold their feet to the fire, which sitting there officers do when not everything goes right. But when it goes wrong, I've got to say our officers across the piece are not slow in talking to our colleagues at Medway North and trying to get the problem sorted. So I think we've got a really good working relationship between the provider side, which is our colleagues at Medway North, and our council officers, and indeed members like myself who sit on the client side. There's a very, very detailed report in Appendix 1, which I will not go into, but colleagues can pick out what they like. I would just like to mention the work that I do and my capital projects team colleagues do in relation to the Building Repairs and Maintenance Fund. And I've got to say that working with our colleagues at Medway North, that fund goes a lot further because of the cooperative way that we all work together. that partnership works well for that, because there's, you know, good suggestions and ideas coming from both sides, give and take. And I think that the vast majority of our buildings are well maintained with a good plan maintenance system now in place to protect them for the future. And you know, that's all down to the close working relationship that officers had, both of the council and Medway North itself. So very happy to take colleagues' comments before I move the recommendation, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Golding. Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Leader. I thank Councillor Golding for the introduction. I found a very interesting report in Appendix 1. It just shows the breadth and depth of Medway North and what they do for us for Medway Council. They seem to have their fingers in almost every pie, and they could do a good job on by and large. One interesting fact that doesn't often get mentioned is on page 210. There's a section about compliments and complaints, and the compliments outweighed the complaints 10 to 1. So I mean, that just goes to show you that the public do think that they are doing a good job. So I think that's worth highlighting. Second thing I'd like to say is around the HWRCs. It saddened me a little bit that to find that we only used something like just over 50% of the available slots were actually used, and we do have a rather large problem of fly tipping in Medway. But on saying that, 78% of the people that responded to a survey said that they did like the booking system, would like it to continue. But there is a little bit of good news. This week, we have launched this week that available slots are available on the day. So hopefully that will put some pay to less fly tipping. The only other thing I think that we need to look at and maybe improve is the bulky waste collection, having a 4-week delay in that. We could look at trying to improve that, because if you've had a bulky waste like a new sofa delivered and you want to get rid of the old one, you don't really want to wait 4 weeks to get rid of it. You can't fit 2 in your house. So I think that we do need to look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chitty.
Thank you, Leader. I have to address the comments about fly tipping. Now, we have been very, very successful in actually dealing with cases of fly tipping, and we've been seen to be proactive in that field. Indeed, we had one prosecution that actually finished in incarceration for an offender that continually fly tipped. We also have a really strong and dedicated way in which we try to follow up any cases of fly tipping. You can't eradicate it, because you cannot eradicate bad, selfish actions by people taking advantage very often of householders that employ them to remove rubbish, and in saying that, they are then held responsible and could be fined. And so therefore, I can only reiterate what has been said, both that we've put in the press and at various different meetings, that anybody that is seeking to have any rubbish removed from their property asks to see for the appropriate licence. If they do that, they are protecting themselves. If they do that, they're protecting the environment. And also, if they do that, those people that act illegally and without the appropriate licence will not have a business that they can continue with, because everybody is following the rules. I think it would be wrong to assume that fly tipping happens on such a huge scale. It actually doesn't. What is important is that those areas, and usually it's rural areas, where they can't be overlooked, are those areas that are chosen to do this fly tipping. But we will, as an authority, we will continue to pursue any of these fly tippers and the people that use them. Thank you.
Councillor Brake, thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I find it interesting that with the Medway North update, whilst a lot of praise has been heaped on Medway North for the various projects that they undertake and the work they do. But interestingly enough, I think on every occasion we all seem to return to probably what is one of the most popular, if I can call it that, subjects of the undertaking of Medway North, and that in fact is very much the frontline service associated with the collection of waste, recycling and fly tipping. And there's no doubt about it, Medway North do in fact give us a very good service right across the whole of Medway. And to me, there is no doubt that I don't think there's a council in the land that can hold their heads as high as we can here in Medway because of the activities of North and the way we work together in partnership. Sadly, where we are here in Medway, we are surrounded in all directions, or literally three parts of our authority boundary by other local authorities. And to me, it's rather sad that these other local authorities aren't as active and proactive as we are here in Medway. And sadly, that we know that in the past we've had encounters with people living outside of Medway who have wanted to use our waste centres that are dotted around the borough. And of course, every time we've had to explain to these people that if their local authority were to pay for the service, then they equally would get the service that is provided by Medway. And I'm very mindful of a recent encounter. It's happened over the last 12 months or so, where somebody actually chose to literally dump their waste, fly tipping, right in front of my own front door. And it turned out that when I reported this, I waited for the Norse to do the usual collections, and they left the waste, and it made me realise that Norse themselves realised that this was not Medway Council waste that had been deposited. Having reported it, the Norse team came up and they examined the 8 bags that had been left, and 5 of those bags contained evidence that the contents belonged to somebody not living in Medway, but the neighbouring neighbouring council. Action was taken, and in fact a fixed penalty was imposed upon the person who had dumped the rubbish, and told if he does it again, or she does it again, then further action will be taken. But I thought this is appalling that Medway Council has had to take the action of tracking down somebody who is dumping their rubbish deliberately in Medway, thinking, well, it's okay, they're next door, Medway will deal with our problem. And that is terribly, terribly wrong. So now I congratulate Medway North for the work that they have done and do today, and I know they're going to do for the future. The number of high-rating compliments that we receive, certainly in Waterstone Ward, relative to North and the hard work that they put in, is exemplary. So thank you, Leader.
Yes, thank you. And just a couple of comments from me. I was very pleased to be able to be the Medway Council signatory to this agreement when it was set up, something like 9 years ago. And at that time, it was a contract of about £6.5 million for facilities management. And we can all see from the report how much that has grown and the quality of the service that has been provided. Now, of course, there are occasions when that service is not up to required standard. Those are few and far between, and are, I'm pleased to say, swiftly rectified by Medway North management. I'm also absolutely convinced, and I've said this before, that we, Medway Council, could not deliver the depth and breadth of services that are on offer via Medway North without this arrangement, because the financial burden would be beyond our means. So what we've done by entering into this joint venture, we've managed to keep our services going to a very high standard. Services, particularly when we look at waste collection and disposal, services that are unequalled almost across the country, and certainly unequalled anywhere in Kent. So it's something to be really proud of, and hence why people seize any opportunity to migrate their rubbish to Medway, as Councillor Brake was just talking about. But we deal with that, as Councillor Brake said. So it's a service to be very proud of. I know we will soon be having renewed negotiations with Norse about the future of the contract. I'm optimistic we'll be able to reach an equitable agreement on the extension of the contract because it is in Medway's best interest to do so. But anyhow, that's a matter for the future. But for now, they're delivering a very good service. The news that Councillor Hackwell talked about of increased flexibility at the Bring sites is a very important and timely innovation. And the reason for the retention of the booking system is quite simple, really, is because that Medway Council obviously is an island surrounded by Kent County Council delivering their waste collection services and disposal services, and they have a booking system, and it's obvious to me that if we relaxed ours completely, there will be a substantial upturn in use of our Bring sites, which is not what we want to see. We want to put, as always, Medway residents first. Back to you, Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Leader. And just a couple of comments on the latter point you've just made, Leader, about the booking system. Also, we've got to remember that Kent charge a significant amount for disposal at their Bring sites. So whilst it is perhaps a nuisance to have to do the booking, but at least it ensures that Medway residents are not ending up paying for Kent's rubbish, which I'm sure they. But also, I think one of the advantages also it smooths out the peaks and the troughs, because every time I've visited the one up at Capstan, which I do every once in a while, there's no queue now. You just go in and out very, very quickly. On the fly tipping issue, a lot of the fly tipping we've unfortunately had to put up with is really a commercial operation, and I'm sure that our council officers work very, very closely with the police in pursuing this, because it is a criminal activity. I'm pleased to say I believe that the idiot who tried to dump stuff in the river just opposite it, they've actually been found out, which is good news. But it shows the determination of our officers and indeed the police to stamp down on this. Leader, I should have also mentioned in the recommendation, as well as noting the contents of the report and indeed Appendix 1, we're also being asked to approve the transfer of the cleaning function relating to council-run sports centres from the Sport, Leisure, Tourism and Heritage Service to Medway North, as is set out at paragraph 10 of the report. So moved, Leader.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is that agreed? Agreed. Right. Thank you, members. Meeting closed.